I want to give you a clue to where his mind on this is and where he got these ideas from. But because we've had a lot of viewers, when I've shown a clip from this certain source, that they have said, hey, man, give us some kind of advance warning. So here is that warning.
A turning point regarding Russia invasion of Ukraine is coming. For months, President Trump has tried to entice Putin to the peace table. He's put tariffs against countries that allow fentanyl to come in our country, other bad behavior. He's left the door open regarding Russia. That door is about to close. Dick and I have got 85 co-sponsors of the United States Senate for congressional sanctions with a sledgehammer available to President Trump to go after Putin's economy and all those countries who prop up the Putin war machine. China, India, and Brazil buy oil and petroleum products and other goods from Russia. That's the money Putin uses is to prosecute the war. And this congressional package that we're looking at would give President Trump the ability to impose 500% tariff on any country that helps Russia and props up Putin's war machine.
What Graham is asking for here is just nonsensical. We're asking anyone to join us in committing something like economic suicide, to say we're going to impose up to 500% tariffs on anybody who does business with India, Brazil, or China, of course. Let's get into the Truth Social. I'm ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing, and when all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia. As you know, NATO's commitment to win, well, actually, I'm going to stop right there. I'm ready to do sanctions as soon as all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia. Okay, so right now, depending on which source you want to look at, there are still, as a European Union, they still get between 13 to 19% of their petroleum needs from Russia. And that really surprises a lot of people. And I still, it's kind of puzzling to me how, on the one hand, you're fighting a proxy war against Russia and spending billions and billions of euros or dollars to help Ukraine kill Russians and trying to defeat them as you're buying oil from Russia. Now, what that tells you is that Europe is doing that because they have to. I think it was like 45% before the war started, so it's quite a bit down from where it was. But still, it's a pretty sizable. It's nearly a fifth of what they're getting. Now, Ukraine or Europe says we're having a plan. We want to be completely free of all Russian petrocarbons. By I want to see 2026, 2027, something like that. Not sure how they're planning on doing that. But now then, Trump is putting them in a position to say, hey, you guys have got to stop doing all business from Russia. And until you do, we're not going to do anything. You see right there, I'm ready to do sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing. And when all nations stop buying oil from Russia. So that's going to be a big issue, because you're talking about a financial shock to the system if all of a sudden they have to go from, let's say it's even on the low number of 13% to zero right away. So that's still a solid percent, and some nations get more than others. Some nations don't get anything from Russia, so it's not going to be a problem for them. But other nations, I think like Hungary and Slovakia in particular, and those are two of the key ones there, they have already said categorically long before this that they have no intention to not buy oil. In fact, they have been resisting a lot of the things that the EU has been doing, because they said, we don't have another outlet here to go and get that oil with anything close to being the ease of it and the readiness of, and the availability of it, and at that price. Yes, there are more expensive places you could get it. Remember, they're getting oil at a discount like India is doing. Now, these 50% tariffs on India have not stopped them from doing it. So I don't know why anyone would rationally think that now adding another 10% to Russia would make them change their positions anywhere. I don't know. But it's a pain point on India, and it would be a pretty big pain point on Hungary and Slovakia in particular, and others to a lesser degree. But you're basically asking them to do something that's going to cause them to lose more money, to put more downward negative pressure on their economy, when there is this much practical possibility that it would actually alter the outcome of the war. It's not going to. That's just on the oil portion. But simultaneous to that, then there's the sanctions portion. And before we get to that, I want to go to the next thing in his line here, because this is something that a lot of the NATO countries are not going to be real happy with, because he says, as you know, NATO's commitment to win has been far less than 100%. And the purchase of Russian oil by some has been shocking. It greatly weakens your negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. So now that you're saying that all the things that the NATO side has done, you're basically throwing all of it in their face and saying you have been far less than 100% in your desire to win. And certainly they, at least rhetorically, would not agree with that. But then it's also interesting. Why are you even talking about the term to win? That, because you imply that that's what should be done now, to win. You want to win. And if we do this, we can win. Win what? I mean, militarily? Win a deal? I don't know. But the idea that we're going to come out this on top is troubling. Again, we go back to that long series of history I showed you. Trump keeps thinking there's a deal to be had, and through my force of personality and my deal-making prowess, I'm going to get them to do something against their own interest for my benefit when they have the position of authority and the position of superiority and power. It's not going to happen. And so now then you've kind of added insult to our allies as well, and saying y'all hadn't been doing enough, meaning that you could have been doing a whole lot more before, but you haven't. And so now here we go. Then we get to really the core crux of it. And he says, anyway, I'm ready to go when you are. Just say when. That's, again, sort of that odd speaking language there. But he said, I believe that this, meaning the Europe stopping to buy oil from Russia, plus NATO as a group placing 50 to 100% tariffs on China to be fully withdrawn after the war with Russia and Ukraine is ended, will also be of great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war. And listen, I'm just telling you, it's not, because that's not going to cause Russia to do anything. This 50% tariffs on China, and you're asking now, just consider this. You're already going to be talking about a significant pain pressure on by having to buy more expensive oil to keep their economy going by those countries that use it in Europe. But now you're simultaneously going to be saying take another hit on your economy by having these tariffs on China. And presumably, depending on what sanctions Trump actually does, as you saw Lindsey Graham's already existing legislation in the Senate, that they're also talking about India and Brazil, meaning that while Trump is still trying to work on that 50% tariff with India, it may even be more. He may pile more on top of that and completely undo all the work that had been going on, which, by the way, the 50% was 25%, and they had been working on just the normal tariffs that Trump had been dealing with since he came back, started this whole process early in his administration. That got thrown on top of that. So now then you're trying to negotiate that. There has been the last week some actually positive signals, both from Trump and Modi personally on their social media accounts, each posting the picture of the other one, saying that, no, we're friends, we're working this out, we're going to get something to an end. And then now then you want to undo that too and put this on top of it? I mean, this just doesn't make any sense. Why would Europe, who's already struggling economically, put 50 to 100% tariffs on China to get China to do something that is against its national interest? And I promise you, there's no doubt China is certainly aware that this threat has been possible and that this could happen. And I'm sure that they've been doing all kinds of contingency plannings ever since Trump came into office. And certainly since they did, have that 145% tariff earlier on. So, where do you think China is going to go? Well, we know where China is going to go because we just saw it at a BRICS meeting they just had, at the SCO meeting they had right before that, at statements during Beijing's celebration of the end of World War II, where they had many, many, many heads of state there, and they were talking about it there, is that they're continuing to move the center of gravity for their economic situation away from the West. And if you want to supercharge that, if you want to make them run even farther and faster, and not just an issue to where there could be a temporary sanctions and tariffs, but a decoupling, keep doing this. Keep going down the path you're going, and you will compel your adversary to just go, okay, you leave me no choice, because there's no chance on God's earth that China is going to go, all right, wow, this 100% tariff on the U.S. and Europe together, that's a pretty potent block, so we're going to go ahead and just turn against you, Russia. Bummer about that. Sorry. So everything we've been doing for the last, 20-something years with BRICS, all the stuff in the last number of years where we're increasing the size of BRICS and trying to expand it, we're going to undo all that, and we're going to go ahead and do what Washington says, because, it hurts too much. I mean, you see how absurd that would be, and they're not going to do that. So then we still get back into the thing we started. Where is Trump going with this, and what does he intend on doing? Well, it didn't stop there. Gary, if you can bring that back up, we'll go to the next section. It says, if NATO does, where did it say? If NATO does what I say, let's see, where'd that go? This is not Trump's war, never would have been, save thousands of lives, whatever. Yeah, there he is, thanks. If NATO does as I say, the war will end quickly. All of these lives will be saved. If not, you're just wasting my time, energy, and money of the United States. So he sets himself up there. I told you this was kind of weird from the beginning in the ways associated. This is another one. If he's already slapped NATO in the face earlier in this letter by saying y'all hadn't been doing anything, certainly been far below 100% on what your efforts have been doing. Now he set himself up as daddy. Now, do you remember a couple of months back where NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte thought, I think he was lathering up to Trump to try to get in his good graces and said, yeah, you're like daddy. You'll be the daddy and tell people what to do. And now here Trump is acting that way. So Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, held Trump up as being daddy that scolds recalcitrant children. Now he is being scolded by that guy. So Trump thinks he is daddy, and that if NATO does as I say, I mean, that language is so important and illuminating. Trump thinks that he is in the position of command and control over NATO. Now, you can argue that we have a great deal of influence and leverage, and that we are the leaders of NATO, have been since its founding. That's certainly true. That's different than command and control, where I issue orders, and that you're children and I'm the parent. And if you do as I say, that is going to look, we think that there is no limit, that we can literally tell everybody what to do and that they will always do it. I'm not sure that that's a given anymore. And I know that there are lots of voices in Europe, lots of them, that are growing much more impatient about all of this and are just, I mean, bluntly getting sick of how they're being talked to by the United States. And I'm not sure that they're going to continue going down this path of just complete subservience and groveling as it is. And that's what it's been. The last time all these European leaders were summoned to Washington after the Alaska meeting, I mean, you saw them all sitting there. They basically all came and kind of groveled to Trump, at least when he was president. They said some different things before they left in their home countries, but they were all basically groveling there in the Oval Office, like they were all called into the principal's office. I mean, kind of keeping that children's situation going there. Gary, if you could throw that back up there one more time, please. But then, you look at that afterwards. If you do what I say, the war will end quickly and all those lives will be seen. Otherwise, you're just wasting my time. Okay, no, the war won't end quickly. If NATO does exactly what they're ordered to do, exactly what the parent tells the child to do, they put the tariffs on, they stop buying oil, all the pain that's going to immediately bring to Europe, it will not end the war, much less quickly. Remember, this is the same guy who believed that he would have the war over in a day, that he said he understood the conditions, he understood the leaders, and he was certain with great confidence it would end in a day. Now that same guy, into now September of his term after taking over in January, is just as confident that if you take this action, Europe, this action which will immediately cause harm to you, but once it works, then the war will end quickly. And as I just pointed out, for the very specific reasons, it won't have any effect on the war at all. Russia, even if China did turn against Russia, which they won't, but even if they did, it's not going to change Russia's effect, but it's also not going to change China. There's no way in God's earth that they're going to do that. And yet President Trump thinks that it will. and he's ready to put his prestige on the line. Now, we could suggest here that Trump knows this stuff, and that maybe he's just setting up a situation here to where when Europe doesn't do this, then he can just go, okay, then I wash my hands. It's done. I've done everything that I can. I tried my best. I'm ready to do all this stuff. If you're willing to do this, then I'm willing to do that, because you guys have been sucking. You haven't been doing much at all. And if you're not going to listen to me, then I'm going to walk. He doesn't say that here. He just says, if you do what I say. He doesn't answer the question or even address it. But if you don't, that's what we're left to wonder with. And that's the condition and the situation he's put NATO countries into, because they're going to have to make a decision here, because to do what he asked will bring economic pain and difficulty on them. And by the way, Trump is playing a bit of a risk here, because if NATO calls Trump's bluff and says, okay, we'll put these tariffs on, maybe they can say, all right, Hungary and Slovakia will help you out with some discounted fuel from other sources here, so it doesn't cause you the pain. So we'll go ahead and put those tariffs on. We'll stop buying all Russian oil. We'll shut it off in a day, and then they'll throw it back onto Washington. Now Trump is going to be put into position. Are you going to now, after all of these negotiations you've been doing since the beginning of your administration, since Liberation Day, I think he called it, when he trotted out those tariff boards, et cetera, you still are working with issues with China. You still are working with issues with India, Brazil, et cetera. Now then you're going to dump another set of tariffs on top of all that and undo everything that has been done so far. He'd be in that position, because then he would have to imply another 50% tariffs. And who is going to start doing deals with the United States? What he's going to do, if he got into that position, would be force the BRICS countries and then others in the world to say, man, it is just chaos to deal with the Western world. The G7 used to be a bedrock of stability that everyone wanted to get involved with, because it was a place to where you could come and do business very stable and have a good chance to benefit from it. Now we're showing that if you want to have anything to do with the West, you're absorbing chaos, and God only knows what happened. And by the way, it may end up being used against you later. But then they look over here at the East, and they see this BRICS formation, who were saying, hey, we don't have anything against anybody. We just want to do business. You guys can come over to do us. We're having an alternative to that. We have stability. When was the last time you saw Sorry about that glitch there. You see that all these other countries are going to have to be saying, do we keep going down this path? Or do we say, we're going to chart a new course here? And I'm just telling you, if we get to the point to where even NATO finally starts saying, I'm tired of listening to the United States, because if they listen to us and they do that, and then the consequence is that the world does shift even stronger and farther over to the BRICS and the Eastern Bloc, then there's no repair for this. And now there's going to be disaster economically, as you're going to have to completely retool your economy to try to stay afloat, because it's built on the understanding that you have global trade. And if you sabotage it yourself, I don't think that we have the intellectual capacity writ large throughout the entire West, much less really in any particular country, to be able to navigate, to create something else that's going to work, and then navigate it in a non-destructive manner. I just don't think we have it. So this is a potentially huge deal here. I almost hope now that this is actually Trump laying all this out so that NATO doesn't agree to it, and then he walks away and says, okay, y'all guys figure it out. You can do whatever you're going to do over there. That's not an ideal way to do this. There are many good ways to navigate this thing down that could be done respectfully, that can be done with coordination. You're going to have to hold your nose in some areas. There's no good way to do it, but there are worse ways to do it. This would seem to be one of the worst ways, but in comparison to having NATO do what they're, quote, told, would be, I think, the worst thing that could happen for the West writ large and the United States in particular. we'll see where all this ends up going. Interesting. One last thing I do want to point out, what's very interesting about this whole note is what's not in it. So he has threats against China, threats against Russia, threats against NATO. Who's not mentioned? Ukraine. Zelensky's not even mentioned. There is no pressure at all being put on Ukraine. So he's not asking Zelensky to do anything, which is interesting because that's where he has among the most leverage that we have can be exerted on Ukraine to bring this war to an end. And they're not even mentioned. And I found that very interesting and perhaps also telling. Maybe Trump doesn't really want to end this war, despite all his rhetoric. Maybe he's good with it going on and he thinks this is going to be a good way to do it, because in the event that we're walking away, it won't be a complete walk away. In fact, I think I think Trump said this again just 24 hours ago. We'll keep selling weapons to NATO for Ukraine at the rate of $1 billion per month. That's what Scott Bessent said. That's what they're on the line for right now. And I think Trump would, we'll go ahead and do that. I think he said that on that Fox and Friends report yesterday. Yeah, we're making money on it, and we'll continue to do that. So I think that by, quote, walking away, he just means diplomatically. But then I think he's going to go, yeah, if y'all want to keep going, sure. Keep spending $1 billion a month buying American-made weapons, and we'll keep sending them on over. And this war can just kind of fizzle out or do whatever it's going to do. And I don't know that he really cares. Trump keeps saying over and over that he's been moved by the high cost of the death. He specified, don't know where he got the number. He specified 7,113 deaths in a week, I guess recently. I don't know if those numbers are just made up out of thin air or if that's actually the number. But if he's actually motivated by that, and then the leverage you have over the biggest party that can actually be coerced into bringing this to an end, you don't even mention them, and instead you go after these bigger ones here that all you're doing is asking them to harm themselves and no chance to actually affect the outcome of the war. We're just left to wonder about that. Well, we are going to stay on top of this, folks, because this literally just happened just hours ago. And like I said, I'm sure that in capitals all over Europe and in China and in Russia as well, all kinds of people are figuring, what are they going to do to this? And as those information keeps coming out and as statements come out, I'm sure that tomorrow there'll be plenty of interviews on the Sunday television shows here in the United States. So that's probably by Monday morning, unless there's some big announcement that happens on Sunday, we'll always bring you breaking news when it happens. But otherwise, we'll bring you an update on Monday and let you know what the reaction from the world is on this. I'm sure there's going to be a lot. Also, make sure you let your friends know. I know a lot of people get their information on podcasts, audio podcasts. Well, we have that available. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict. Be sure and have your friends go there. Just type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and they will find us waiting for them. And for your friends who actually prefer to get things on the written format, they can go to danieldavisdeepdive.substack.com. and you will find us waiting there as well. So all kinds of ways you can get your information. Some people like one way, some people like another. Just don't keep this all to ourselves, folks, because we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth, no matter what it is. And your friends deserve to know the same kind of things you do. So be sure and share this. Also, like and subscribe this video if you haven't already. That helps us more than you know. Thank you very much, folks. I hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday morning on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.